Sarah Gelsomino with the law firm of Freeman and Gilbert, with Terry Gilbert, and this is Wendy, who is the sister of Gregory Fox, the person who committed suicide in the county jail. So we're here today to announce the civil rights lawsuit filed today on behalf of the family of Gregory Fox. His sister is here to represent the family today. Greg was 36 years old. He was a pretrial detainee in the Cuyahoga County Jail, meaning he had not been convicted of any crime. He was in the jail awaiting his opportunity to defend himself against the accusations of criminal activity. In August of 2018, Greg came into the jail suicidal. The jail was on notice that he suffered from serious mental illness and depression. He had previously been in the jail, and the jail had records of his mental health needs at that time and his suicidal ideations. In fact, the jail had put him on suicide watch at that time. But when Greg came into the jail in August of 2018, even though he told the jail that he was suicidal, he continued to express his need for mental health care, for medications to help him stabilize himself. The jail did nothing. They completely failed Greg. They didn't put him in suicide watch. They didn't give him the care that he needed. They did not allow him access to the medications that he needed to keep himself safe. Instead, they put him in general population. They put him in red zone isolation. And it was there on August 28th that Greg hung himself in his cell while on lockdown. He was not watched appropriately. There was only one correctional officer assigned to 2 pods at the time, which is severely understaffed. It would be impossible for the jail to make sure that everyone was safe and well cared for with that little staffing at the time. Greg was found hanging in his cell. He was then taken to Metro Healthcare, where he struggled to survive for 2 days until he died on August 30th of 2018. Wendy will speak for the family, and then we can talk a little bit more about the crisis, the humanitarian crisis that is the jail and continues to be the jail in Cuyahoga County.
Gregory was my brother. He was a son, an uncle, and a family member. He suffered in life with mental illness, and he desperately wanted to be a functioning member of society. He tried. He was trying. He was imperfect. He made mistakes. But he was actively seeking counseling and medications. Cuyahoga County had the job of caring for Greg while he was in the jail. The county could not and did not manage to get Greg to even those first steps in the justice system. Greg never got to defend himself in his accused crimes, and instead, because of Cuyahoga County and the lack of appropriate staffing, medical care, and many, many other devastating conditions that led to discrepancies in the system, Greg died in his jail cell. His unnecessary and painful death lasted near 48 hours as he lay in Metro's hospital. Greg died because of multiple infractions of a broken system. That failed so many. It counted on its victims to keep quiet because of the shame of their own crimes, mistakes, and flaws. These people are family members, our neighbors, possibly our coworkers, people who have served our nation, our fellow members of society, the residents of Cuyahoga County. I need just a moment. These people, even if they have been in Cuyahoga County, will be back in society, next to you, serving you, possibly a parent of a child that goes to school with your child. According to the county's own statistics from the Cuyahoga Jail website, there are thousands of Cuyahoga's own citizens. This is one of the worst jails in the country. Preventing medical care, forcing inmates to live in deplorable conditions, locking them in confined quarters for excessive amounts of time. These conditions wear on anybody's mental health. And when my brother begged for help, you had the audacity to overlook him. How is that justice for anyone? Instead, you watched as the days went on until he went into a further spiral. He told you he did not want to die. And what did you do, those of you who had the power to help him? I hold you, Cuyahoga County, accountable for his death and the deaths of 8 others.
Greg was one of 8 people who we know of who died in 2018, but the suicides have continued. At least 2 other people that we know of this year have committed suicide in the jail. So clearly, the jail has not instituted the necessary reforms to stop the humanitarian crisis that continues there. People continue to be in danger every day. The evidence in this case is staggering. There are other people on the tier who were also detainees with Greg, who saw Greg looking up and down, walking up and down the hallways, begging for help. He was asking correctional officers and corporals for medical care, for help, for the medications that he was prescribed, and he received nothing. The county absolutely was on notice that Greg was vulnerable and suicidal, and they looked the other way, time and time again, throughout his entire incarceration there. This was a completely avoidable tragedy. And now the county needs to be held responsible. They need to atone for the wrongs that they let happen, that they condoned, and that they continue to condone in the county jail. Do you have anything to say?
Any questions?
I mean, I guess the big thing is you keep hearing out of the administration, things are improving, the number of COs has never been higher, number of inmates has never been lower. Are things better inside that jail today than they were 12 and a half months ago when the report came out?
Right. The jail has not yet actually shown evidence of those reforms that they have talked about to the public, and they have a responsibility to do so. They claim that they are making reforms. The numbers of correctional officers was so incredibly low that even adding some correctional officers doesn't mean that they're at the point that they need to be, that they have enough to keep the people in the jail safe. The numbers of people who are detained in the jail go up and down. However, we continue to get reports from the jail that the conditions are abysmal. 2 other people have died that we know of. The county continues to be incredibly slow or refuse to disclose documents about the status of the jail at the time. So until they come forward with real proof that the conditions in that jail are constitutional, that the people that they're holding are safe, it's the responsibility of all of us to hold their feet to the fire to make sure that all of the changes that need to be made are completed.
Obviously, when Greg died, others had died before him. Substantially more,
Right.
died after him. What does that tell you about, I guess, how in tune with what was happening anyone was?
It's actually our understanding that on the same day that Greg hung himself, another person committed suicide in the jail. And people had, as you said, committed suicide before and after. The number of attempts, of suicide attempts in that jail alone is staggering. Do you want to talk about what that means to you? No? Okay. I mean, this just goes to show you that this pattern of allowing people to be in conditions that are so deplorable and so unsafe that they are able to commit suicide, to continue to deny access to basic medical care and mental health care to keep people safe, to us shows a complete disregard, a flagrant disregard for the value of the lives of the people that they're housing. The county was on notice all the way up. You know, this wasn't happening in secret. The levels of disregard, the level of intentionally turning the other cheek and refusing to make any changes all the way up the chain of command to the head of the Cuyahoga County it's shameful. It is shameful. And the county continues to refuse to take real accountability for the conditions that they created and allowed to continue to this day, even though they know that people are suffering and people are dying.
When you say all the way up, does that include County Executive Armin Budish?
We believe so, yes.
Did Gregory get the required medical screening at the time he was admitted and booked into the jail?
The medical screening is definitely an issue in the jail, and the screenings have been ineffective and inconsistent, to say the least. Part of the problem with knowing really what's happening in the jail, the lack of transparency that we see over and over again with the county, is that we don't have all of the records yet of Greg's intake process. But what we know is, without a doubt, the county was on notice. The correctional officers, corporals, throughout the system, they were on notice that Greg was suicidal. They were on notice that he suffered from depression. He had a history of that they knew about, and they knew that he was on medications and he was denied those medications.
And at this point, you have seen no evidence that he went through that medical screening at intake that he was required to go through by the county's own policy?
Right. At this point, I'm unclear what happened at intake when Greg came in. I'm positive that once he was in that jail, though, he was absolutely telling people and requesting medical care consistently.
Had he been in kind of a mental health unit the first time he was in there?
Yeah, when he was in custody of the Cuyahoga County Jail over the summer, from June to August. Earlier in August, he was out for a short period of time, and then he came back into the jail August 21st of 2018. He hung himself on August 28th. During the first stay, he was actually put on suicide watch and had received some mental health attention, and that is all in the records. So the jail knew it. They knew it. Had just one person listened to him and checked his records and looked to try to provide the care that he so desperately was crying out for, they would have seen evidence of all of his issues. They had previously, tried to keep him safe, and they just disregarded him entirely this time.
Did the system break down, or do you believe that was just the way of doing business at that time?
We believe that the system, the entire system within the county jail is corrupt. I mean, the county jail is as we've said before, it's a walking civil rights violation. It's a ticking time bomb. The level of the constitutional violations run so deep there. And so for this reason, we have a policy and practice claim within our lawsuit. So we're not seeking only justice for the damages suffered by Greg when he suffered at the end of his life, and by his family who suffered because of his loss, but we're also seeking reforms in the way that the county jail provides access to mental health care and necessary medical care and takes care of people who are suicidal in the jail, because we believe that that entire system is broken.
And remains broken today?
As far as we know, absolutely.
Let me just add a little bit to your question about, whether there are improvements since the Marshal's report. It's now been a little over a year since that report has come out. We've actually been in a class action case trying to push them into making the needed changes and reforms to provide a more stable and safe atmosphere for inmates. And they keep talking about hiring people. They keep talking about a new system with Metro Health. And they supposedly have had some experts go in there. But as Sarah said, we still get calls just about every day from families. I would say we get about 3 or 4 calls a day about conditions that are affecting people in real serious ways. The correctional aspect of the jail and the mental health and medical aspect of the jail are not in sync. And in fact, the former liaison to Metro Hospital, a guy by the name Gary Brack, in May of 2018, stood up in front of the county executive meeting and complained about the serious problems. This is before anybody that year had committed suicide. And what happened? He was fired by the county executive based on the idea that he wasn't working well with Ken Mills, who was the completely incompetent and inexperienced director of the jail, who's now under indictment. So there was a notice that things were falling apart back in May. There were inspections by the state in June, and other outside agencies calling attention to the jail's deplorable conditions. And all these people died based on the neglect that whistleblowers were talking about. And so we have no reason to believe that even after the explosive media attention to this case, and to the county jail after the marshal's office, that they're going to do anything but window dressing and try to get some kind of an idea out there to the public that they're doing things. We hope they will. We don't want them to fail. And we're trying to get a federal court in a separate lawsuit to monitor this situation, to make sure that it doesn't happen again. There have been lawsuits against the county jail since the 60s. All right? The first jail was on I'll give you a history lesson. The first jail was on 21st and Payne. There was a lawsuit filed on that. Then the Justice Center was built, and Jail 1 which had a capacity of 700 people. This is at the time in the mid-70s when crime was overwhelming in Cleveland. It was like one of the highest periods of our history of criminal activity, yet the jail was only designed for 700 people. So they built Jail 1 at the Justice Center. That increased the capacity, and then that jail was falling apart, and then they built Jail 2, taxpayer bond money. And now, just 20 years later, we're back in dealing with this thing. So, so there's this long history, and every administration that runs the county always says they're doing a good job. But we now have evidence in terms of this family, of the Fox family, and other families who have been deprived of their loved ones because of this disaster in the jail. So we feel strongly that this lawsuit will maybe give some degree of comfort for their loss and the ability to move forward and realize that maybe there is a way of getting some justice. That won't do a whole lot for the pain that they suffer, but at least they feel that they are, by doing this, filing this lawsuit, they can speak on behalf of their brother who was crying out for help and make sure that this doesn't ever happen again.
Do you believe the administration ignored Gary Brack and his whistleblower allegations in May of 2018?
Yes.
Do you
I do.
believe, had the administration acted at that time, Greg Fox would still be alive today?
Well, no one could say for sure, but at least they could have put in place and listened to some basic conditions, like Sarah was talking about, proper screening, getting them up to see a psychiatrist. You know, there was only one psychiatrist for 2,300 inmates. And, so I'm not saying that they could have prevented any of these deaths, but the statistics show that that's an incredible high rate of suicides that cannot happen unless there's a problem in the jail systemically, okay? I mean, if you go around the country and look at jails, in populations in cities that are like 3-4 times bigger than Cleveland don't have that kind of rate. So something was wrong, but they didn't do anything. They just ignored Gary Brack. They ignored the Ohio Jail Inspection Agency. They ignored another organization, I think it was some kind of prison policy group, who looked at the jail. They ignored Marcus Harris, who was the head of nursing, who quit because no one was listening to him about the process of getting inmates into medical care and to mental health care. I mean, I don't know what more could have been done. This was not just citizens and activists saying, do something about this in humanitarian conditions. It's people that work there, professionals, were saying the same thing. And they ignored it because they saw the jail as a money-making operation. The whole idea of bringing Euclid into the fold and Bedford Heights into the fold was to be able to charge other jurisdictions per day fees that would go into the county coffers and help the budget. But none of the money was going into the programmatic work that needed to be done. I would also say that the court has a responsibility here too, because the 35 judges in the common police court and the other judges in the municipal court, they have a responsibility to make sure that people who can't make bail because of theft offenses or low-level drug cases, drug abuse, and can't make a $1,500 bond because they can't afford $150 are in there. And we know from statistics that 40% of the population of the American prison system are people who are mentally ill. It has become a repository for mentally ill people as opposed to simply dealing with the old idea of protecting people from harm. And it's got to change, and hopefully this lawsuit will help that.